Would you look at that? Hillary Clinton was paying her campaign lawyers to spy on Donald Trump as a candidate and then as president, according to special counsel John Durham's latest court filing. Durham has already indicted 3 people associated with the Clinton campaign or the phony Russian dossier. Igor Danchenko, the lying Russian crapsack who was the source for the dossier. Kevin Kleinsmith, the lying FBI lawyer whose sins of omission in FISA warrant applications allowed the FBI to continuously spy on Carter Page. And the third patsy, Michael Sussman, the Clinton campaign lawyer who worked with tech exec Rodney Jaffe to infiltrate Donald Trump's servers as candidate and then again as president. Information was mined and presented to the FBI as damning evidence. Trump was in cahoots with the Ruskies, and even though the whole thing was fabricated as a political dirty trick to distract from Hillary's shady private server and massive email deletion, they kept going. The surveillance state, it is alive and well. And under Obama's White House, FBI Director James Comey and CIA Director John Brennan knew full well what Hillary was doing, according to Brennan's declassified notes unearthed by Fox News in 2020. Yet both agencies instead trained their ire and might on the 45th president. Love him or hate him, no American president and no American should be so easily penetrated for political gain by a host of agencies and actors who happen to find his election offensive and his comportment icky. But that's exactly what happened. What happened? Yeah, Jake Sullivan, who was Hillary's special policy advisor, so special at the time, he stated in October 2016, computer scientists have apparently uncovered a covert server linking the Trump administration to a Russia-backed bank. Hillary retweeted all of that garbage. This was a falsehood perpetrated by the Clinton campaign to sway voters. And it didn't work, so they just kept going once Trump was elected, so he'd be impeached. Once James Comey was fired, he leaked information through his professor friend, and the Mueller investigation commenced. So who came up with this great idea to smear Trump? Jake Sullivan? Hillary herself? They should both be indicted, and Sullivan should be fired immediately. Remember, he's President Biden's national security advisor now, who's been beating the war drums, claiming Russia's Ukrainian invasion is imminent. After all of this criminal nonsense and focusing the spying establishment with nauseating douche hubris, can we trust anything out of Jake Sullivan's mouth? Add to that, his wife, Maggie Goodlander, works as counsel for the U.S. Attorney General Merrick Garland with direct access to the Durham probe. Conflict of interests are spreading like a cruise ship stomach bug. And this is one of many reasons Hillary Clinton can never be allowed anywhere near presidential politics. She worked on the Watergate investigation. She was fired. And she internalized how dirty tricks could easily change political fortunes if they were executed properly. Nothing about this is proper or right. And if they can spy on the president, imagine what they can do to you if you become the enemy. I don't even want to think about it, so we got to stop it while we can, and that's the memo. Well, you'd think something like this would get coverage far and wide, right? No, the media has been mostly silent on this criminal corruption, but remember when they tried to downplay the investigation? Watch.
The biggest scandal was when they spied on my campaign. They spied on my campaign.
There's no real evidence of that.
Of course there is. It's all over the place. Leslie,
Sir,
they spied on my campaign and they got caught.
Donald Trump and William Barr promised that Durham would expose huge corruption, but he hasn't done that.
Is apparently an ongoing, concerted Republican and pro-Trump project to try to turn the investigation of the Russia scandal into some kind of scandal itself.
Oh, no. OK, wait till the Durham report comes out. And then nothing happens, and they just move on to the next conspiracy theory. It is never going to end. And guess what? People who want to believe that BS are going to believe it.
Oh, Don, just stop talking. Are they silent now because they got it dead wrong? Let's get into it with tonight's party panel. From Versus Media, he's a podcast host and the Spectator USA contributing editor. Stephen L. Miller is there. The L is for we've got Democrat strategist, radio host, and Fox News contributor, gorgeous in pink, Leslie Marshall. Happy Valentine's Day. And host of Radical with Shane Hazel. It's a podcast. He's also running for governor in Georgia. Shane Hazel is back. Welcome, everyone.
Good to be here.
Hi,
Yes,
Valentine's
it's
Day.
great to be here.
Happy Valentine's Day.
Thank you very much. This is such a crazy story because, you know, love him or hate him. And a lot of people don't like Donald Trump. They don't like his personality. Some people like his policies. Love him or hate him, they were spying on him. He was right. This is proof. Are there going to be more indictments, Stephen?
I think you probably a few months ago you'd go probably not, and to now kind of wait and see. If you look at you mentioned a media blackout. Durham hasn't even been mentioned at most of these outlets since about December. CNN, Washington Post haven't mentioned his name since December 22nd. NBC, the last time was September. They framed it as a Trumpian conspiracy theory. CBS News, November was the last mention of John Durham, and ABC is a complete blackout that I couldn't even find his name anywhere. This is a legitimate story, regardless of how you feel about Donald Trump, like you said, or even Hillary Clinton. This is one of these stories where it's a complete blackout, and then all of these networks and outlets are wondering why people go to Joe Rogan to hear stuff like this,
yes,
because he's the only one that's reporting on things like this, or podcasters, or alternative media like Substack. So this shows you kind of the vacuum in the bubble that the media is working in right now, because this is disfavorable to Hillary Clinton. And them, to a certain extent.
I want to know who authored this gambit, Leslie. I want to know whose idea it was to work with people who were maintaining those servers and, you know, mining the information that was readily available. There were millions and millions of people who were expressing the same kind of flags, yet, you know, 1,000 of them were coming from around Trump entities, yet somehow that was cobbled together to create a narrative that the former president had a back channel to a Russian bank. That is all garbage. I want to know, did Hillary Clinton think of this? Did Jake Sullivan think of this? And, you know, does that rise to the level of criminal indictment?
Well, if it did, then I think there would be indictments handed down. There was no problem handing down an indictment for Michael Sussman, you know, by Mr. Durham, and certainly he would do that if these were indictable offenses.
We
but here's
don't
the
know
problem.
if he's done,
Here are
though,
the words,
Leslie.
Here are the words that the attorneys, that I am not an attorney, the legal experts I have interviewed on my talk show are telling me. Possible, alleged, maybe a guy knew Hillary who maybe did something. That's too many maybes. I don't think there are going to be indictments coming down.
Actually, Roland Joffe was working with Michael Sussman. He lied about that. He lied about that to the FBI when he was questioned under oath, and eventually he came clean. Now, he has pleaded not guilty, but as you know, the federal conviction rate is in the upper 90s. So he will probably, you know, he will be convicted, and he will probably do some time in prison. But it's not just that. It's not just a loose configuration of people who might have had something to do with this or that. I'm sorry, but the circle is closing in, and it is not looking good for Jake Sullivan and Hillary Clinton, because they were parroting out these talking points that they had manufactured in 2016 about a plot that they invented in order to distract from Hillary Clinton's private server. The CIA and the FBI both knew about that, Shane. So will anything ever change with the surveillance apparatus?
I don't think so, not until it crumbles. And I think it's wishful thinking at this point to think that Hillary Clinton, who has been nuclear Teflon in the past, whether it was Benghazi or whether it is her servers or phones or any of those things, that she willfully had destroyed. I mean, we're looking at a career criminal who had said, you know, let's do something to get into the servers. She's not the mastermind behind it, I don't think. But in terms of indictments, you know, the Republicans are already saying, you know, if you give us the Congress in, you know, 2022, we'll put these guys up and try them in front of Congress. And the problem is there's never any justice. Even if there are indictments and even if they do lie to Congress, nothing ever happens. And that's why America's become a banana republic, because there's absolutely no justice for anybody at the top echelon.
No, and the people who have been indicted are patsies. Peter Strzok knew, James Comey knew, but they go for Kevin Kleinsmith. He wasn't the one who was leading the charge here. You know, I don't think you would consider him the tip of the spear. He just happened to be a guy who didn't cover his tracks well. And, you know, the omissions that we read about in the Mueller report they are starting to add up to much, much more. And you should never want this to happen to anyone, regardless of their political party. And that is the cycle that we have to break in this country, that, hey, it's okay if you spied on the president and you used very, very nefarious means in order to gather information that would hurt that person. It's okay if you don't like that person. That is never okay. And there have been very few people, Ron Wyden is among them, who have called truth to power in terms of those who are able to and who are actively spying on us.